So I know you guys have heard about the war in Ukraine and Russia, the war in Israel and Palestine, and the upcoming potential war in Taiwan and China. And now we even have a fourth conflict, and actually there's even more than that. I left out a few in India and Pakistan. Now, this has not been the first time that India and Pakistan have been at each other's throats, but this goes all the way back to colonization. Yes, colonization has caused another unstable region in the world, as we've always seen before. And to add on top of that, both of these nations have nuclear powers that have the potential to end the world and cause World War III and cause a new alliance of nations to jump in on the war. Today, I'm going to break it down exactly how this conflict started, who's responsible, why did it happen, and then we'll go all the way to the ceasefire as of today, May 12, 2025. Like the video, subscribe. I'm Austin Holleman. Let's get into it. Now, we'll start this story off long before Pakistan or India ever existed as an independent nation. For centuries, the Indian subcontinent was home to many different cultures and faiths, such as the Hindus, Muslims, and the Sheiks. But of course, when the British took control, as European powers always do, they do not just control the nations, they have to divide the nations, which is why you see colored people in South Africa, which is why you see that it only took 500 Spaniards to take over Mexico because they were able to divide and conquer the tribes, and then they were able to take control of that chunk of land. The same thing happened in India. Under British rule, Hindus dominated the Indian National Congress, while in response, the Muslims created the Muslim League, led by Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who said Hindus and Muslims are two different nations, which is where we start to see the beginning of the divide in these ethnic groups. And as we all know, by the 1940s, India's independence was inevitable, just like the other British colonies. But this was not going to secure unity now that the British were leaving power. In 1947, the formerly known British India was split into two nations. India will be a secular democracy, and Pakistan will be the homeland of Muslims, which it is today. 15 million people fled across the new borders, and the Hindu and Sikh families were rushed out of Pakistan. The Muslim families left India for Pakistan. Now, this wasn't just a retreat to the new lands, but 200,000 to 2 million people were estimated to be slaughtered in this process of forming the two new nations. Now, the state that is in dispute at this current time of 2025 is a state known as Kashmir, which became the flashpoint of the Indian and Pakistani conflict. Now, the problem with Kashmir was it was a Muslim majority region ruled by a Hindu king. Because of this king could not decide if he wanted to join India or Pakistan. So, of course, as you already know, the Pakistani tribal fighters took it by force. In response, the king asked India for help, and they agreed to join. This was the beginning of the first India-Pakistani war in 1947, which ended with the UN-brokered ceasefire and the creation of what we know as today the line of control. India at this time would now control the majority of Kashmir, and Pakistan would control the remainder of the territory. But surprisingly, both of them felt entitled to Kashmir, so both of them continued to claim it, which kept tensions high in between the two nations, which in turn means that the fight never ended. And you can see something similar with this with the 48th parallel in North Korea. As I always say in my videos, you guys, a lot of these wars that we see today usually have the same base for how they started. Colonization and Europeans drawing borders wherever they feel is necessary. This is the reason why Israel has so much conflict, is because of the geographic location and where the borders are drawn. The same thing with African nations. The same thing even happened in Latin America. Since that 1947 war over Kashmir, what followed next was in 1965, another war over Kashmir. In 1971, India helped East Pakistan now become Bangladesh. And I put a map here on the screen. Whenever they originally split India into India and Pakistan, you would see on the eastern side of India, there was a Pakistan, and on the western side, there was a Pakistan. That may be confusing, but now that eastern side became Bangladesh and the western is Pakistan as we've always known it today. And then in 1999, the last war that they had was the Kargil War. But this was not the end of conflicts. In between those wars and today, there were many terrorist attacks, especially coming from Pakistan and Indian soil. Keep in mind that this was also during the Cold War, the majority of these wars. And during that time, Building nuclear weapons was a way for nations to guarantee that they had some sort of security or a big enough muscle to flex against other nations to prevent them from being directly invaded, which is why you see militias or terrorist organizations do these actions so that way that there's less responsibility on the nation that those terrorists came from. This is the reason why France, the United States, Russia, North Korea, Pakistan, India, China all have nuclear weapons. And if you keep that in mind, after World War II, when were the last time that those countries were invaded after they obtained those nuclear weapons? And this is why India and Pakistan got those nuclear weapons. So India tested its nukes the first time in 1974, and Pakistan followed in 1998. And the reason why the world is paying attention to Pakistan and India is because one small mistake, and like as I said before, allies could come together on both sides and start a World War III, or even worse, a nuclear war. But this is a cycle that we see in India. Every few years, they have a border skirmish, civilians die, they talk it out, they come to another ceasefire, and then it starts again. But this isn't a war about nukes or armies. It's a cultural war, and it's a religious war, and it's also political. Now, I don't really know how, and wars fought over religion has always been a thing that's been going on for centuries, probably even millennia at this point. I don't know what's so important about religion to people where they feel the need to murder people over it, but leave in the comments what you think about that. I don't think that that's necessary, especially the Crusades and terrorist attacks based off of somebody not liking Christianity or somebody not liking Hindu or whatever it is. It's all unnecessary if you ask me. Now, to break it down even further, India is again, mostly Hindu, secular nation. And in response to that, Pakistan was created as a Muslim state to defend themselves against persecution from the Hindus in India. Similar to what you see in Israel. Israel was created for Jews to escape persecution, and rightfully so because they have been persecuted all throughout history. You guys can decide on your own why that is, but these are just the facts. Now, that being said, leaders on both sides have used these conflicts in between the religion to get voters to keep them in office. Nehru and Jinnah laid the foundation for this, and Gandhi and Bhutto fought the war in 1971. And it went on and on again, and today prime ministers, diplomats are still locked into this fury. And it's been going on and on for decades, and diplomats and prime ministers are still locked into this decades-old feud in between the two countries. Now, in April 2025 this year, if you guys seen this video of this man ziplining in Pahalgam, there was a terrorist attack, and I thought this was very, very shocking that this guy was riding down the zip line. And he's enjoying the zip line, but he doesn't realize that there's people being shot and running away from being shot as they're being questioned if they're Hindu or Muslim. And if they say that they're Muslim, they will ask them to cite a verse from the Quran or say a prayer or whatever it was. Basically, prove it that you're Muslim, and something that only Muslims would know. And if you guys have been to Nairobi, if you heard about the attacks that have happened here in Nairobi, this is a similar tactic that they use where they would go in where they know that there's a mix of Muslims and other people, and they would ask people to say something that only Muslims would know. And if they didn't know, they would kill them on the spot. And this is another example of this happening in Kashmir. 26 people are confirmed to be dead at this point, May 13th, 2025. And of course, they're mostly Hindu pilgrims because this was committed by Pakistani Muslims. Now, of course, as I said before, you guys, just like with PMCs that we said in the last video, countries don't usually invade other countries directly anymore because there's too much responsibility with sanctions and everything. So and I'm not saying that India or Pakistan does this, but it's not uncommon for these countries to send a small PMC group or a terrorist organization such as Hamas from Iran, going into Israel, or they will send a militant group, somebody that they will send somebody that they don't have to take responsibility for, and they can just quickly say, oh, that wasn't us. That's just this group of our country that we don't have control over that went in and attacked your country. So, of course, Pakistan denied that, as we have confirmed right now. But India, I'm assuming, didn't believe that. So they responded with airstrikes. Now, this airstrike is known as Operation Sindoor, which is on militant camps inside of Pakistan-controlled Kashmir. So in other words, India sent airstrikes into Pakistan's region of Kashmir that they have under their control, because remember, both countries are claiming the territory. And now this go around, Pakistan claims that dozens of Pakistani civilians were killed as a retaliation from India. So for the first time ever, in response, of course, Pakistan didn't sit around and do nothing. They responded with hundreds of drones. They fought their first drone warfare against India. Now, of course, Pakistan claimed that it stopped dozens of Indian drones coming into Pakistani-controlled territory. But also at the same time, India claims that they stopped hundreds of Pakistani drones targeting cities like Punjab. Now, since we live in 2025, what's next is cyber attacks. And if you guys don't know, a large portion of the world wars, or if there's a World War III that comes, not as much boots on the ground will happen as drone warfare or cyber attacks. And if you guys have been following the Russia-Ukraine war, even Russia has used cyber, or allegedly, Russia has used cyber attacks against Baltic states like Estonia. Now, these cyber attacks usually target critical infrastructure like Indian government systems or radar stations. Now, if these cyber attacks are used to target that type of infrastructure, it makes it easier for the other side to retaliate with more force, since the response from the nation that they're attacking will be slowed or just not occurring at all. But as the cycle always happens, on May 10th, 2025, Donald Trump was able to agree with a ceasefire between the two nations of India and Pakistan. But of course, after that, the ceasefire did not last very long. There were more explosions, power outages, missile interceptions, and just more confusion to make the situation even worse. Now, of course, this grabbed global attention, and United Nations claimed this conflict to be a global threat rather than a regional threat. And even China, who's been allegedly in a conspiracy, they've been actually accused of backing Pakistan. And we can get into that in another video because of the trade war. But they've been accused of backing Pakistan. And even they claim for peace in India because they can see the potential that this could turn out to be on a global war scale. So the big question is, what's next? Pakistan's concern is border security, water rights, and the region of Kashmir. These are three crucial things that will be able to release tensions in this area of the world and bring peace. But of course, India wants to see terrorist attacks come to an end from the terrorist organizations in Pakistan. But the truth is, neither one of these nations can afford a war, as they're both nuclear powers. They are both rising economies. And of course, most importantly, they have people in the nations that are not as involved or invested in this war, and they just want peace and to be able to live their normal life every day. What do you guys think about colonizers starting another conflict in another region of the world that is still seen to this very day? How do you think India and Pakistan will turn out in the end of this conflict? And how do you think it'll affect the world and the global economy? And who do you think will take sides? I'm austonholleman. Again, if you guys enjoyed that, make sure you give the video a like, subscribe, leave a comment. And if you really enjoyed it, feel free to join a Patreon to help us assist with the ever-growing cost of production with these videos. I do have to pay editors and people to do B-roll, etc., and pay for software. Or you could hit the Cash App at $austonholleman. I will see you guys next time.